Hi, today we're going to have a little roundtable on QC and how that works with MAM systems and what's going on. So we've got a few people here from 3 companies, well I guess actually 2 companies after your acquisition there. And we'll just start at the end over here, and maybe you can introduce yourself and just say what you're working on.
Sure. I'm Paul Turner. I'm the VP of Product Management at Telestream, responsible for the Vantage product line, which is our workflow management and transcoding product, and the Lightspeed Live product, which are live ingest to workflow products.
Great. And then Thomas?
Okay. My name's Thomas Dove. I, until very recently, was CEO of VidCheck and founder of VidCheck. Very recently been acquired by Telestream. So we do AutoQC products, VidChecker principally.
Good. And let's talk about EditShare.
My name's Matthew Hallan. I'm the Video Group Director, responsible for development on the asset management products at EditShare.
All right, so let's just generally get right into QC, topic on that. Obviously, QC is a really important element, particularly with having the channel explosion. There's no way people can handle that directly. And how does EditShare handle that?
Well, we do that through Flow, which is our asset management system, and we have part of that product is a way to automate common tasks such as QC, and we do that with third-party integrations such as with Telestream and Intera Baton, and you can define a workflow and you can trigger a QC process from various different triggers, such as metadata changing. If someone clicks a button that says QC this item, or if there's a watch folder that you dumping files into, then we can pass those files downstream to be QC'd. And I think it's an increasingly important area of our customers are asking us for is where should that be done? We do a lot of ingest, as well as delivery, and I think a good point for discussion here is also where should that be done? You know, is it an ingest? Is it a delivery? I mean, typically it's done at the end, but I think increasingly our customers are looking to do more QC on ingest.
Well, I think certainly that depends on their particular workflow,
Indeed, yeah.
as well as the product they're trying to produce. Now, certainly from your point of view, you're meeting various standards on the products you have, and what difficulties do you have with regards to people accepting automatic checking?
It tends not to be much difficulty with accepting automatic checking. I mean, it's driven commercially because, as you say, there's just too much content, and also when people get into it, these standards are getting so complex, and it doesn't add value for an editor to try and do all this technical stuff. I mean, why get a person to do the technical stuff? That computers are very good at doing technical stuff, so let the computer do it. There's a few keys there which is making it easy to use, where someone who's new to it, and an editor or someone post-production, someone receiving files, can just pick from a list. Oh, I'm delivering to Netflix. I'll pick the Netflix template. If it gives a check mark at the end, done, good to go. And that's the sort of philosophy we have on that, is take away all that technical difficulty and make it as easy to use as possible, in fact. So that's a bit of the philosophy of that, should we say.
Now I'm going to ask Paul here a question, specifically with regards to transcoding. Do you see people doing QC before the transcode or after the transcode?
Again, depends on the use case, depends on the customer. What we see, particularly with Vantage, because Vantage does a lot of work for process management as well, in these complex setups where you're going to deliver to 6, 7, 8 different delivery mechanisms, a lot of people want to do the QC right at the front end because they don't make the video in all the cases. So it's coming in from a supplying company. DPP is a perfect example where you want to check it before you put it through all of this workflow, because if it's not good, you may as well stop it right at the front end. There's an argument to be made that you do it at the front end and at the end. So you can check that it was good going in, it's bad coming out, which preferably it's not. But you can prove that the transcode itself has happened correctly. And one of the beauties that we have now with this integration of the 2 companies, is we have much stronger capabilities to look at the video as it goes through the stages, because every stage changes the media somewhat. And you may have some changes that are more important to you than other ones.
Yeah. Thomas, you want to comment
Yeah, I was
on
going to
that?
say, I mean, our experience is that it's better to actually QC before. I mean, typically there's a master, a mezzanine file, a high bitrate file, high quality, and you do a very detailed check on that, because there's no point starting the transcode if you don't start off with a good file. You know, if you don't have the right format, the right file length, the right frame rate, and the right video quality, why do the transcode? So do a very detailed check on it to begin with, and then check the transcode afterwards. I mean, you mentioned 6 or 7. I know some of our customers, they do 40 different output versions of the same media, actually, and that's not uncommon, even more than that. And you can imagine if you're doing that on a movie, a 2-hour movie, how could you possibly try and do anything manual on that? It makes no sense to try and do that, and QC is the only way to do that sensibly.
Now, Matthew, do people accept QC as something just part of the process, or do they consider it a pain?
That's a good question. I think it's becoming increasingly accepted that it is a requirement. As you said, the number of files, the volume of clips that are coming through the system means that it's no longer practical to manually check this stuff. So with our products, with Flow and the automation workflows that you can define, it just helps efficiency. You know, you have to automate this stuff. There's no way that you can employ enough people and have the money to employ those people to check it. And I think there's it's interesting about autocorrection as well, I think, which we'll probably come on to, but how that fits and how we inform who we need to inform that there are problems and how we deal with those problems. I think we'll probably move on to that, but I think that's an important area as well. As if there is a problem, what do we do about it?
Mm-hmm. Well, speaking of autocorrection, really when you're talking even about transcoding, and now of course we're talking about ultra high definition and wider color gamuts, the question is, do you really need a colorist, or can you automatically make those changes? You know, it becomes color volume issues and things like that. So, Thomas, how do you do an autocorrection?
Yeah, I mean, we have some patents actually on that, on the correcting video in a way where it's visually lossless, in fact, and we think that is pretty important. I mean, now people are beginning to accept, as you say, that doing the auto QC rather than doing it manually is the only way to do it sensibly. And my belief is in 5 years' time, people will say, well, why did we ever try and manually correct this? Why did we send it back to an edit bay for an editor to alter the video levels or to alter the audio levels or to do other changes like that, which a computer, again, can do very sensibly, reliably, accurately. It is interesting, we see time and again our customers are saying, oh, I couldn't possibly do this auto correction stuff, you know, what are you doing to our content? You know, you might be destroying it or mangling it. And then normally what happens is they're in a real time pinch, they've just got to get something out, and they try the auto correction, and after that they love it, they're sort of evangelists and so on. So my view is, as I say, 5 years' time, people say, well, why did we do that manually? It makes no sense. I mean, let the creatives do the creative bit, let the computers do the technical bit and fix that for you. And we found that very successful for our customers.
Now, Paul, would there be a point where something would be necessarily had to be done as a manual correction?
Sure. I mean, what we're talking about here is automating the automatable processes. Now, there's still very much a creative need, and to your point about changing color volumes, you have to be really careful when you do that you don't damage the artistic intent of what was put in that color, the original color space. So yeah, I think it's inevitable that in many workflows, not all, but in many workflows, there's some manual intervention stage that you have to have somebody do it. Give it a once over with their eyes. This is the look I was going for, and you didn't damage it as part of your technical correction.
Yeah.
I oversaturated that color intentionally.
Well, that again comes down to what the creative intent is. And Matthew, you wanted to comment on that?
Yeah, just going back to the auto-correction, I think I agree with what you said. I think it will become more and more accepted as a process, but from the asset management point of view, there are ramifications for that, because typically you're going to create a new file in doing that, and that needs to be properly registered, and it needs to have the preserve the metadata of the original, and you're essentially creating a new version, and so there are ramifications in doing that as well.
I guess the other point with autocorrection and high dynamic range now, that opens up a whole new opportunity.
Indeed, yeah, I see that as, as I guess the whole industry is new opportunities and new challenges, if you like, yeah, we'll have to see what happens. But I think it's happening, so we need to do our best to deal with that and help our customers to work out solutions to their problems.
And Thomas, if you had something that was in HDR as an example, and then of course it was in standard dynamic range, how would those correction algorithms understand those aspects?
Yeah, I mean, our correction algorithms have very high bit depth anyway, so in a sense we convert both SDR and HDR to, I don't know what you call it, UHDR, ultra high dynamic range anyway internally, and then we convert back, so it doesn't in a way impact that actually, so we can deal with that. In fact, we've got HDR on the show here, actually, HDR correction, HDR checking and so on here on the show.
And the same for the wider color gamut?
Yeah. It's all fairly straightforward. Some time ago we changed the product to allow for that very wide gamut and high bit depths and so on, actually, to allow for that as far as we could possibly see. And dealing with 8K, and I mean, we've tried 16K video files if anyone wants to go that far in time as well, actually. So ultra high resolution as well, so we cover that.
Matthew, how does this work with regards to asset management systems? Is it just part of the ingest process then?
It's part of automated workflows that the customers define. So an example of that would be after ingest. So you may be ingesting from baseband or from card. Once those files are registered in the system, we can then trigger a template, a QC test to be done on those, and then I guess more important is what happens after that. If it is auto correction enabled. If it is, then we're going to, it's going to give us a new file. That file needs to be registered as a new asset. It needs to be linked to the parent. We need to copy the metadata across to preserve it. If there's no auto correction, then we need some notification mechanism. We need some way to tell the user what's happened. And within our product, we do that by registering the reports that come out of the QC system. So they're kept alongside the tested asset, and you can view that within the application. And the other thing that we do with VidCheck is for manual review, any sections of an asset that have failed. For instance, if you've got black frames, is a classic one. We mark those with kind of tags within the asset, so you can very quickly jump to those positions within the file or within the clip when you're viewing it back to see whether they're intentional or to take the relevant action. So the way we handle it is really just being flexible. There's so many different use cases, and I think they'll only get more, not less.
More. So one last question here, just about manual checking, Paul, and I'll give you guys a chance to roll in as well on that. I was recently in some production houses in New York, and they don't disagree on the automated, but they still like to do an eyeball check. Right. So does that say it helped them in the process, or they're still not confident, or why is that?
I think it's probably the confidence level. You have to prove, unfortunately with automated processes, in a creative world, which is what we're in, you have to prove that the automated process is at least as good as the human process would be. And so there's a natural tendency to run an automated check and then look at it as well to make sure that the automated check didn't miss anything. It's frankly just as likely, though, that the visual check by a human missed something and the automated check will find it. So yeah, there's a suck it and see kind of approach that can happen there.
Mm-hmm. I think you're right. It's really a question of trust in the technology, isn't it? It's really just having that confidence, and I think, as you mentioned earlier, I think it's really going to be not necessarily thrust upon customers, but they're going to have to it will mature, and I think because of the volumes now, it's just not
It's an
possible, is it?
inevitability.
Exactly.
It has to happen. You can't do this manually with the level of interaction, sorry, the level of processing for the various versions that are going. Let's not forget, if you're doing a transcode to a file for delivery to a tablet, you do 7, 8, 9 transcodes because they're different bit rates and they all need to be checked.
Yes.
And you simply cannot deal with that volume with human beings, not efficiently.
All right, Thomas.
I mean,
I'm going to actually interrupt you here and ask you this question.
Okay.
Because we didn't really talk about audio enough.
Yeah.
And what happens with audio is, of course, you have the automated check, and you always have the discussion: do I do it on a clip basis? Do I do it on the whole program? How does that get integrated in with ads and things like that? But the other point is, people still put processors at the end of their transmission chain to make sure that they're meeting the spec, because they don't want to get a fine. So, double correction?
Well, I mean, you obviously try to avoid that, so the file itself is corrected. I mean, it is interesting about double correction. And when we were looking at auto correction, we looked at, okay, if you just do a QC check, what happens is it gets sent back, and the audio is actually one of the most common things where the levels are out. And what we found was that then the editor would get it back and say, oh yeah, I'll just tweak those colours a bit while I'm there, and I'll just make that graphic a bit more punchy. And I send it for QC, and it passes on the audio, and then it fails on the graphics. So you send it back again to the edit bay, and they put it back again. And so you end up, if you're doing just auto QC and not doing auto correction, you end up typically doing 3 times around the loop of doing back to the edit bay and re-auto QCing it, actually. So that's a very inefficient process. I think also the manual QC is a very important point initially for confidence, and the point you raised, Matt, about where you have in the play, you have little time ticks where the audio QC has found the fault, and you can just jump to them very quickly and say yay or nay, I agree with that, I don't agree with that. There is, and as far as I can see for the foreseeable, there will be a place with manual QC. So you do all the technical QC bit first, and then you do a manual QC, because bits where you're saying, is this file good for pre-9 p.m. transmission? Is this file good for transmission in the Middle East? Is this file, you have to just some things that you have to do creatively. Do I want to change something creatively? And those things I can see you do want to do some manual work on, but that should be after you've got a known good file in every other way, basically. So you don't want to do all that and then have to do it again and again, basically.
Well, there's no question that everybody's producing tons of profiles on delivery, different formats, and that's going to happen forever. So getting that original master down pat right away is perfect. Well, thank you very much, gentlemen.
Thanks.